Hi, my name is David Bose. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center, and welcome to this edition of Washington Policy on the Go, where we come to you every week during the legislative session. We talk with our Senate directors, we get updates on state policy and how it's going to impact your life. We talk about what's happening in state policy, both in the legislative sense and also in the administrative sense when that comes up. We've got a short show today. We'll be done by 12:30 for those of you who have other meetings or other obligations. We do try and keep it under an hour. If you have any questions during either interview, make sure you put them immediately into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There's a toolbox there for Zoom. Just put your questions in at any time, and I'll try and incorporate them into the conversation right away. If we don't get to your question, we'll try and answer you a bit later on. Privately, or sometimes a Senate director will post a blog based on your question. So don't be shy. Put those questions in there. We'll try and get to them as soon as possible. And if all else fails and you think of a question later on, our contact information is available at washingtonpolicy.org. You just go to the staff section, and all the staff has their email readily available, and you can email us privately if that's what you wish to do. In the meantime, we'll be speaking today with Elizabeth Hovde, our Center for Healthcare Director and Center for Worker Rights Director. We'll talk with her about the latest when it comes to so-called universal health care in Washington State, as well as the payroll tax. We'll talk with her about that coming up. But first, we're going to start with Pam Lewison. She is our Center for Agriculture Director, and she's been writing about how the new income tax on capital gains, now called an excise tax by the state of Washington, is impacting agriculture, as well as the emissions tax has been impacting agriculture. Pam, I know you've got a lot going on, so I appreciate you taking the time out for this. Let's talk about what the state's been doing, because there's supposed to be some exemptions to agriculture I think in both these pieces of legislation, correct? So let's start with the emissions tax and how agriculture was supposed to be exempt. Give us an idea of what the exemptions were and how they're being applied or not applied now.
So agricultural purchases of gasoline, diesel, propane, and natural gas were all supposed to be exempted from the addition of any emissions tax to their bills. However, we started getting reports before the first auction ever occurred. So in January, when people were making bulk fuel purchases, particularly for diesel and gas, they were curious about why they were being charged an extra anywhere from 30 to 50 cents a gallon on their bulk bills. And distributors and refiners had said, well, we're in anticipation of this upcoming emissions auction. We're trying to cover our bases because they operate a business. And there's no mechanism for us to exclude you from these purchases. So, farmers have been effectively being billed for this tax even before the real baseline for what that tax was going to be. We had a rough idea, but as it turns out, it works out to be about 38 cents a gallon for gas after 39 cents a gallon for gas after the auction, and 47 cents a gallon for diesel. And those taxes are still being applied to farm bills that should be exempt.
So, when they say there's no mechanism there, what about refund from the state? Does the state have a mechanism where you take the receipt in and say, well, look, I'm being charged for this. I shouldn't be, here, send me my money.
So the law specifically directs the Department of Ecology to make sure that there is a mechanism in place for ag purchases to be exempt. They didn't do that. And in fact, they've said, well, this isn't our problem. This is a problem between you as a purchaser and the company that you're buying from. The companies in turn are saying, we would happily exempt our customers that need to be exempted if you can provide us with a means to do that. So we're getting a little bit of circular answers about how this is supposed to happen, but ultimately what ecology should have done in the interim last summer and fall is create a rulemaking. They had more than an adequate amount of time to go through the rulemaking process to say, okay, this is how we're going to do this so that we can identify ag purchasers early enough that they are exempt from this auction before it ever occurs.
So I'm trying to figure out how this would work. If they say, well, we can't do it right now because that's between you and the other purchaser, if the other seller is collecting a tax on behalf of the state, I mean, I take it the state is collecting that amount of money at some point. So, I mean, I've just never heard of a circumstance like that where they would say, well, that's your problem. They're collecting a tax. That's it'd be like,
the most interesting part about it really is that we know that the money is available to refund because it's already collected.
Sure.
The problem comes that ecology says, well, we've already spent it. It's in our budget. We're going to spend it. What they should be doing, being fully aware that there is a significant problem to the tune of at least $33 million just in diesel purchases alone, is set aside those funds until they can figure this out. Because, on our farm or any other farm in the state, I'm telling people, keep your receipts so that this can get sorted out and you can get reimbursed for this illegal tax that you are being assessed at this juncture. And
that would just be a nightmare I mean, I hate tax season with a passion because I'm there's a reason why I'm not a research director because the idea of keeping receipts, and instantly I'm thinking, you know what? I didn't even turn in my receipts yet for the last trip I made. I'm horrible at stuff like that. They're somewhere, they're in an envelope somewhere, but this is an extra burden on people who are really busy that they don't want to have to do. I get it. That's what you'd have to do that right now if you ever want to see that money again. But are we really talking about that much? I mean, I can picture some people saying, look, farmers got to take it for the team, right? It's all for a good cause. Surely I mean, last time I saw the legislature talking about farming, it was a halftime enterprise with people making all kinds of money. So, a few more cents on diesel defined by, I guess, 47 cents a gallon. What harm is it going to cause?
When you think about it in terms of what a bulk purchase looks like, you're talking about people buying 1,000 gallons of diesel at a time, or 500 gallons of gas, or in the case of natural gas and propane, you're still talking about hundreds of pounds of a liquid gas that's being purchased at once. So this is a pretty significant amount of money that you're having to front when we're already looking at other input costs that have increased dramatically in the farm year, and we're only in April. People are just now starting to really get field work done. But you're talking about compounding that 47 cents on top of what we've already been paying, plus the new potential for you to pay capital gains on any transactions, which I think we're going to talk about here momentarily. Plus, the cost of employing someone has gone up. The cost of FMLA has risen. The cost of L&I has risen. So when you start looking at all of these things that the state is piling on to not just ag, but the business community at large, I mean, it's everyone, but ag in particular, where they were set aside as being exempt from this particular piece of increased input costs, it's not a small amount of money if you look at it over the long haul.
So, at this stage, with the legislature, we're in the closing days of the legislative session. It's a tight squeeze to get any legislative fix through. Is there a big movement here? Because what I fear is that rural legislators, this would be a really high priority. Urban legislators are going to think, oh, you know what? They're just rural people complaining again because they don't want to pay the tax. and they're not necessarily going to be motivated to look that closely. I'm hoping I'm wrong about the judgment, but what's the buzz right now in the legislature for a fix on this?
There were two fixes proposed, and both of them had some issues. I mean, I appreciate the college try to figure out a legislative fix, but ultimately, one of them would have reimbursed for considerably less than the amount we're talking about in terms of cents per gallon. And the other fix would have required oil refineries and distributors to remove the line item citing the cost of the emissions auctions to their customers. So in one, you're getting less money back than you paid, and in the other, you're getting less transparency than you deserve.
Well, this is because they've been telling people it's only going to cost a penny or so. I mean, the governor, when Todd released his figures earlier, I guess it was late last year, about how much this was going to cost per gallon. The governor said, well, a penny, maybe two at the most. This is just nothing. They're totally wrong. And in fact, there was one media outlet that issued a fact check, and I'm looking forward to the fact check correction here based on what we have now is actual information and receipts on how much is being charged. And, lo and behold, it's 39 cents a gallon for gas, 47 cents for diesel. Mm-hmm. Not small change for anybody, bulk purchasers especially. So I'm with you 100% there. So right now, just before we move on, what's the next step, or is there anything? What should people be clamoring for? What are you seeing?
I think there's a lot of buzz about what should happen. From my perspective, what should happen is that as soon as, the moment that session closes, the Department of Ecology should do its job. They should go into a rulemaking and figure out how to get people their money back. And if they're not able to do that, maybe then it's time to explore some legal recourse or something else to force ecology to do the work that they've been tasked to do in that piece of legislation.
Yeah, it's amazing how there's this consideration that the money is spent because we wanted it, even if it wasn't yours. That's a pretty childlike approach to something so serious. Plus, this idea of removing the transparency on the bill was particularly atrocious, I thought, because one, people have the right to know these things. In other venues and circumstances, this kind of itemization is important, and people look at it all the time. It's not like people aren't willing to pay a premium for doing environmentally positive things if it's worth it, right? I mean, people will pay extra for an electric vehicle, for example, or for something that has any green labeling. That's why so many products put it on there, even if it's really not that important. Like you'll see, for a while, the gluten craze thing was hot. So you'd see gluten-free on a slab of meat, you'd be like, well, yeah, shocking. Anyway, let's turn now to something else that's been a focus of yours, another place where it was thought that a lot of farmers would be exempt because the new income tax on capital gains, now called the excise tax of Washington, it only applies to individuals. It's only for gains past 250,000, and it's for stocks and bonds, not other real estate or other kinds of transactions, generally speaking. But now you're saying farmers are getting hit in the middle, and it's the exemption that was thought to be there isn't really there for them. How does that work?
So there's a really nice disclaimer on the Department of Revenue's website that says these are the things that are exempt from this tax, including the sale of farmland, including sales between corporations. But what ag folks were told when the excise tax was still just a bill and not something that the Supreme Court had ruled on was that there would be instances in which the excise tax would apply to both farm corporations and the sale of farmland, but that they would have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. So this disclaimer that is on the DOR website is totally disingenuous and false, if you want to be perfectly honest, because of how farms incorporate themselves and operate as businesses. So if you are in certain situations where you are transferring land effectively from one person to the next, there's the potential that you could be subject to that capital gains tax because of that purchase, and because we're talking about individual to individual or entity to individual or entity to entity. And if you look at those entities in particular, they're, we think of corporations as being 15, 20, numerous people. But oftentimes farms operate where it is a married couple and they are the entity. That makes them individuals, and that in turn makes them potentially subject to the capital gains tax.
So is there a set standard by which somebody could go online and look and see what kind of transactions would apply to them and wouldn't in the circumstance? Or is it more of an art form where the Department of Revenue is going to come on a case-by-case basis and say, well, yeah, this one would, this one wouldn't?
My recommendation is that anybody who is looking to do a transaction that has to do with farmland or the transfer of farm from one, even from one generation to the next, should 100% contact the Department of Revenue and say, I need you to review this to determine whether or not we're going to be subject to a capital gains tax and to the excise tax in particular. And if we are, what can we do to fix it?
Have you talked to farmers that believe they are subject to this now?
There are a lot of people who are concerned that they are subject to it based on how their entities are formed, whether it's a family group or just a married couple or even an individual in some cases holding claim as the individual owner of an LLC. And they should be concerned because, if you go into that sale thinking that you're only going to be subject to, say, the REIT and perhaps some sort of income taxes, you may be in for a rude awakening that you also have this additional 7% tax to pay on top of that.
Yeah, it's no small tax. I mean, 7%, it's funny because it's so easy to dismiss small amounts, until you actually get hit by them, and it's death by 1,000 cuts on some of the stuff. Plus, it seems like if you have that disclaimer at the front, on the front page on that tax, you're putting a lot of people in jeopardy by the false information. Or it's like, we'll talk with Elizabeth Hovde coming up, but one of her pet peeves is the marketing that the state has done on the payroll tax for long-term care, saying, you've got peace of mind, but for a lot of people who need long-term care, your $36,000 maximum benefit is going to last, maybe 3 months, and that's not peace of mind if you're in this situation. So
I think the real, the real problem that I have with the capital gains tax in particular, and that 7%, is when you look at Western Washington, where land values are so high. If you're sitting on a 10-acre farm in King County and hoping that that's going to be your retirement fund, when you figure it out at $10 million for the sale of your 10-acre farm, 7% is a lot of money.
Yeah, and we've yeah. Real quickly, a question from Michelle: What about non-farm corporations that are just mom and pop shops?
So I don't know for the answer, and honestly, probably neither does DOR. But it's important, I think, to ensure that you are checking your bases both with, find an accountant, find an attorney, talk with the Department of Revenue. As I said, Revenue basically told ag advocates that this is going to be on a case-by-case basis. We're going to look at each one individually. So it's really important, I think, to have all of your ducks in a row and truly understand what the potential for your tax output is going to be, whether you're a corporation or you're just, you and your husband or husband and son, or, however you're farm is structured, there is still the potential that that excise tax could get you.
What a nightmare. This observation from Lawrence, he said he asked Costco to put back the tax sticker on the pumps, and they fear DOE and other agencies if they do. Yeah, I mean, look, just the attitude of the state legislature trying to pull a fast one and remove the itemization of this tax shows that this kind of transparency is not enjoyed. It's like the advisory votes. That removing them is supposed to be the great championship of democracy, because people are so confused by what they mean, as though Washington voters haven't been able to throw their 2 cents in on a tax.
I think the entirety of this legislative session should tell people that we are in a current environment where transparency and honesty is really not the order of the day. It's a tough business right now. That's for sure. Pam, thanks so much for making the time. I know you got some mom things to do, so I'm going to let you go and be able to get those done. We'll keep you and everybody else updated on any work done by the college or others to make that fix happen. And be sure to check out the blog. I mean, Pam and others update every day at WashingtonPolicy.org. Check the blog out regularly. Thanks, Pam. Stay safe.
You bet. Let's turn now to Elizabeth Hovde. She is our Center for Healthcare Director, among other hats, like the Center for Worker Rights Director as well. Elizabeth, you've been writing about a couple of things of late. One is the payroll tax and the countdown, so to speak, before we all get a lower paycheck. I think the last I saw it was 74 days. So I think today would be 73 dads left before.
Last time I wrote was 77. So now it's probably 74, I think.
Somewhere in there. Yeah. So do you think people will even notice? I mean, it's a relatively small amount. It kind of gets absorbed in the paycheck. What do you think the reaction of people is going to be, if anything?
I think many people live month to month and will notice a decrease in their paycheck. And I would assume they won't be happy about it, especially if they learn more about how this, like you said earlier, does not offer peace of mind. The interesting thing about this tax is it's being sold as something that helps people when they're in need, but you may not qualify for the benefit ever. There are several reasons why you won't. And if you do, even if you're a low income worker and you paid more, or you get more back, 36.5, than you put in ever over your lifetime of working, even if you do that, the reality now is you qualify for Medicaid if you're low income, Medicaid long-term care services. So what the state has done is they've shifted the burden of long-term care costs for those people on their working years. So it's not altogether not paid for by workers. So the cost shifting is just dishonest. It's putting a burden on low-income workers now for a benefit they may or may not get, and that they would have qualified in many cases anyway for.
Ironically, to pay for that reduction in the paycheck, I will probably reduce the amount I put away for retirement. So,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
potato, not a pleasant way to live.
And that's the other thing, this is one life need. We all have life needs at different times and in different amounts. And for the state to say you need to have a savings plan for one of those life needs that might or might not affect you is just weird. We need to be encouraging the population to save for our needs, to be independent and not rely on the government. And instead of doing that, we've created this program, and I'm afraid there's more programs on the way. We got paid family medical leave going on for people who want to bond with a child or want to take time off work to care for loved ones. We've got this now. I'm wondering what's next.
Well, one of the things that might be next, you mentioned in your blog from April 13th, which is the proposed Washington Health Trust. And among the things that they're flirting with was yet another payroll tax designed to really hit employers, with over 10% on employers. But remember, if employers get hit with a 10% and more, 10.5% payroll tax on you, then that means they're going to count that as part of your salary. It's not like that disappears. So, your odds of getting a raise or, they're going to go down from that until the market catches up.
Exactly.
That's a direct hit on your pocket. Or I should say it's an indirect hit on your pocket, but it's going to have a direct impact. So tell us about this trust plan.
The Washington Health Trust, some of you might know there was an initiative gathering effort around the state for whole Washington. They wanted to bring universal health care to the state, taxpayer financed universal health care. That's a funny thing. Everyone wants everyone covered. Everyone wants universal health care. We all want everyone provided for. The difference is this is taxpayer financed for everyone. So we need to start calling it what it is. Taxpayer financed universal health care is what this initiative was after. This is that initiative in bill form, basically. So a bill went before the legislature, Senate Bill 5335, to enact a statewide taxpayer financed healthcare system for Washington residents and non-residents, by the way, some non-residents, but it did not go anywhere. This bill was introduced, it went nowhere. But then the universal health care was requested by the senators to review the bill and possibly adopt provisions of it, use it as a model as they're going about their work in paving the path toward universal health care in Washington state. So they considered that bill, and that was last week.
So it's a universal government-only healthcare system where, and one of the challenges is when people say healthcare, oftentimes you're not actually talking about healthcare, you're talking about insurance for healthcare. And then the devil's in the details on these things, because the two things that make people, even very, very left of center states, the places where they've enacted this thing and then suddenly they get hit with the tax bill and people change their mind. Along with that, they're also hit by the fact of the need for rationing in order to pay for it. So you might get your health care, but you might get it too late, instead of getting the cancer screening when you needed it, you might have to wait an extra 12 to 16 months. And, if it's your loved one who's needing that operation, or if it's you, that's going to be a huge issue for people. And that's where these plans go awry, the best laid plans of mice and men. So.
And that's the worry, even if the state can find a way to make the tax equal what you pay right now for premiums, and employers pay for premiums and all of that. Even if they could do that, I'm not sure they can,
Sure.
But even if they could do that, the pattern of universal government financed healthcare is a rationing of care. It's people not getting care. It's delayed care. In Great Britain and Canada, there's a number of examples of the wait times that are associated with their socialized healthcare system.
Yeah, Sally Pipes, a renowned expert in this field. I've seen her talk before where, her mother's care was particularly painful for her because, it was delayed when she needed an operation to remove cancer. And then by the time it happens, worse, there are far worse results. Let me put it that way. But before I let you go, I did want to give you a chance at a victory lap, because I know you've worked very hard and you've been looking at the nurse licensure compact for quite some time. What's the latest status on that, and why is it important?
That's super exciting. The nurse licensure compact has passed both houses, and I haven't checked on it today to see if it's received a governor's signature. I should have done that before I came on here, but I didn't. In any case, it has passed both houses, and historically this bill has not gone forward. The nurses union has been very against it. It introduces competition to nurses who are already here in some ways. But I think that COVID has been a big game changer. The nurse licensure compact allows us to hire nurses from across state lines who are already qualified, licensed nurses in other states, and you could hire them immediately without making them jump through licensing hoops when they got here. And that might not have seemed as important before COVID, but certainly now it does. If we get a hot spot breakout. We want nurses here as fast as we can get them, and this helps allow that to happen. Also, it's a worker rights issue, you know, to be a nurse that's qualified in another state who moves here, especially our military spouses, and not be able to work just doesn't make any sense. So this compact joining will solve that problem. It passed with great bipartisan support. Democratic lawmakers were sponsoring the bills. And so this is a good victory.
Yeah, that's where, I mean, just looking at this makes me wonder how many other professions out there should this kind of approach be taken, some kind of license transfer, if, or, you know, fine, let the state collect a little document fee where they can just put their license from the other state on file, because the training and other things that are the same essentially. And then we could allow people, especially like you say, military spouses and others, we've got more than we have a lot of people in Washington State who are not born here. You know, people coming in helps them get their jobs faster, working at their full potential. So I think it's a good approach, and maybe we need to expand that approach.
We're also a really good place to be a nurse. Our state is always in the top of the rankings for being a nurse, for the pay for nurses. So this makes us very compatible too. And if we have a nursing shortage, that's what we want to be. We want to be able to attract nurses here. And this allows us to have nurses come here, even try it out, and move here permanently if they desire. The traveling nurses problem is a problem. I'm not going to deny that, and this will not help that. But that's a separate problem. We need to give access to patient care when patients need it, especially in times of pandemics.
We've got one final question here, but it's pretty broad. It's how do we expose the true harm of these bills? This is Washington's become the petri dish of socialist ideas and laws for America, even if they create negative impacts and are only seen as positives in the media. How do we expose the true harm these bills and laws cause for the people? I think part of the answer to that is share the material on Washington Policy Center's blog, because our center directors go through a lot of this stuff. They show in detail how these problems are going to arise, and we need your help to amplify that. Especially now, you know, social media is not what it once was. You used to be able to post things, and they would go very broadly. Now there's much more of a choke, I think, on that kind of information in some spaces. So, Elizabeth, thanks so much for making the time. And I know it's a tight day today, and congratulations on at least one area where you've got something to cheer about in this legislative session.
For sure.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
All right, now for the rest of you, thank you for joining us on this latest edition of Washington Policy on the Go. We'll see you next Tuesday. Donald Kimball will be hosting for me, be the moderator, because I'll be out on that Tuesday, but I'll return in 2 weeks. The show will go on though, and you'll hear from our center directors again next week as well on Washington Policy on the Go. If you missed, if you saw part of this and you want to repeat it, if you want to share it with people, check out the Washington Policy Center's YouTube channel, because these episodes are updated there usually within 24 hours of the broadcast. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next week.